March the 17th, 1944. Chartres, occupied France, 43 kilometers southwest of Paris. Marcel Dubois stands in the ruins of his bakery, staring at the blackened ovens, the collapsed roof beams, the fine layer of ash coating everything. The Germans requisitioned his building 6 days ago. Compensation: a typed receipt worth nothing, and a verbal warning that complaints result in deportation. The bakery that his grandfather opened in 1891, that his father expanded in 1923, that Marcel inherited in 1939, is now ammunition storage facility 47B. 300 tons of German artillery shells, mortar rounds, and small arms ammunition, packed into a 3-story stone building in the center of Chartres. The building sits exactly 200 meters from the cathedral, 150 meters from the main Wehrmacht garrison, and 80 meters from the rail depot that feeds German positions along the Atlantic Wall. It's the single largest ammunition concentration within 50 kilometers. Destroy it, and German artillery batteries from Dreux to Rambouillet go silent for weeks. Except nobody can destroy it. The French resistance spent 2 weeks planning an assault. Impossible. The Germans have stationed 40 guards around the building, machine gun posts on adjacent rooftops, patrols every 15 minutes. Attack it directly, and you lose 30 fighters before you get within grenade range. The British Special Operations Executive analyzed bombing options. Too risky. Drop bombs in the center of Chartres, and you kill 500 civilians when the ammunition detonates. The explosion would flatten 6 city blocks. SOE proposed a commando raid. Mission planning concluded that insertion would require 20 men, extraction would be impossible, and success probability was less than 10%. So, the ammunition stays. 300 tons of German ordnance sitting in Marcel's bakery, protected by Wehrmacht security doctrine, and the simple fact that conventional sabotage methods don't work against hardened storage facilities. What the Germans don't know, what Wehrmacht security forces can't predict, is that Marcel Dubois spent 22 years managing the most dangerous aspect of commercial baking: flour dust. In concentrations above 50 grams per cubic meter, suspended flour particles become more explosive than gunpowder. Marcel has spent 2 decades preventing flour dust explosions through careful ventilation and humidity control. Now he's going to cause one, deliberately, catastrophically, in a building packed with ammunition. He's going to turn his bakery into a fuel-air bomb, using nothing but flour, time, and intimate knowledge of a hazard that's killed more bakers than the Gestapo ever will. The Germans think they're storing ammunition in a sturdy stone building. They're actually storing it inside a detonator. Marcel just needs to introduce the fuel. The science of flour dust explosions is elegant and terrifying. Individual flour particles won't burn. Drop a match on a pile of flour, and nothing happens. The flame extinguishes against the dense powder. No oxygen can reach the combustible material. But suspend those same flour particles in air, create a cloud where each particle is surrounded by oxygen, and you've created an explosive mixture with approximately 40% of the destructive potential of TNT per unit volume. The mechanism is simple. Flour is organic matter, primarily starch and protein. Both are hydrocarbon chains that combust readily when exposed to oxygen and ignition. In powder form, the surface area to volume ratio becomes enormous. A single kilogram of flour compressed into a brick has perhaps 0.1 square meters of surface area. That same kilogram, dispersed as fine dust, has over 400 square meters of reactive surface. When ignited, combustion propagates through the suspended particles at supersonic speeds. The rapid oxidation releases massive thermal energy. Temperature inside the flame front exceeds 2,000 degrees Celsius. Pressure wave velocity reaches 600 meters per second in confined spaces. The explosion isn't chemical like TNT. It's a physical detonation caused by rapid expansion of superheated gas. The effect is identical to purpose-built fuel-air explosives that military engineers spend millions developing. Bakers have known about this hazard for centuries. Mill explosions were common in the 1800s. Entire grain processing facilities would detonate without warning, killing dozens, leaving craters where buildings once stood. Investigations eventually identified the cause. Flour dust accumulation combined with ignition sources, static electricity, overheated bearings, or metal sparks. By 1920, industrial safety regulations required ventilation systems, humidity control, and strict protocols for managing dust accumulation. Marcel learned these protocols from his father. Keep flour storage areas well ventilated. Never let dust accumulate on surfaces. Maintain humidity above 60%, so particles clump together rather than remaining airborne. Inspect machinery daily for potential ignition sources. The protocols work. Marcel operated his bakery for 22 years without incident. Now he's going to violate every safety protocol he knows. When the Germans requisitioned the building, they made modifications. They removed Marcel's industrial ovens, too large, too much wasted space. They demolished interior walls, creating open storage areas for ammunition crates. They sealed windows to prevent observation from outside. They installed electric lighting powered by a portable generator. And critically, they removed Marcel's ventilation system. The exhaust fans, the humidity controls, the air circulation infrastructure that prevented dust accumulation. Gone. Wehrmacht engineers considered ventilation unnecessary for ammunition storage. They created a sealed environment, perfect for ammunition preservation, also perfect for fuel-air detonation. Marcel realized this immediately. He watched the Germans modify his building and understood they'd created optimal conditions for the explosion they were trying to prevent. All that's missing is the fuel. 300 kilograms of dispersed flour dust would be sufficient. The building's interior volume is approximately 2,400 cubic meters. At 50 grams per cubic meter, Marcel needs 120 kilograms to reach minimum explosive concentration. At 125 grams per cubic meter, the optimal concentration for maximum blast effect, he needs 300 kilograms. Marcel has access to 800 kilograms of flour. He's a baker. Even under occupation, even with German ration controls, he maintains stockpiles. The Germans expect this. Bakers need flour. What they don't expect is how he's going to introduce it into their ammunition depot. March 11th, 1944. 6 days before Marcel stands in his destroyed bakery. The Wehrmacht quartermaster for the Chartres district, Hauptmann Friedrich Kohler, summons Marcel to garrison headquarters. Herr Dubois, your bakery has been selected for requisition. The Reich requires secure storage facilities for military supplies. You will vacate the premises within 48 hours. You'll be compensated according to established procedures. The compensation is a joke. 200 Reichsmarks for a building worth 50,000 francs. Marcel doesn't argue. Arguing gets you deported. He signs the requisition papers and asks one question. Captain, the building contains substantial flour inventory, approximately 800 kilograms in storage bins. The flour is valuable. May I retrieve it before you take possession? Kohler considers this. Flour is controlled material under occupation regulations. But allowing the baker to remove his own inventory seems reasonable. You have 48 hours. Remove the flour. Everything else remains. Marcel bows slightly and leaves. He has 48 hours to inspect his building before Wehrmacht security makes it impenetrable. He spends those hours studying every modification the Germans are making. He watches engineers remove ventilation fans. He observes where they're placing ammunition crates, heavy artillery shells on the ground floor, medium mortar rounds on the second floor, small arms ammunition on the third floor. He notes the location of electric lighting fixtures, the routing of power cables, the position of the portable generator in the basement. He pays particular attention to the sealed windows. The Germans are installing heavy wooden shutters, reinforced with steel bars, padlocked from inside. The shutters will prevent observation. They'll also prevent pressure relief. When the explosion comes, expanding gas will have nowhere to go except through the building's structure itself. The force will be contained until the stone walls fail catastrophically. On March 13th, Marcel removes his flour inventory, or appears to. He loads 500 kilograms into his truck, genuine removal, witnessed by German guards. But he leaves 300 kilograms hidden inside the building's infrastructure, packed into spaces the Germans haven't considered. 20 kilograms inside the dumbwaiter shaft, a vertical passage running from basement to attic, sealed with loose boards. 30 kilograms in the crawl space above the third-floor ceiling, accessible through a panel in what used to be Marcel's office. 50 kilograms distributed through the building's old pneumatic tube system. Installed in 1920 for sending orders between floors, still intact behind the walls. The remaining 200 kilograms packed into burlap sacks and hidden in the basement coal bunker, a brick vault the Germans are using to store the portable generator. The coal bunker is perfect. Enclosed space, poor ventilation, adjacent to the building's primary electrical system. Marcel hides the flour sacks behind stacked coal, covering them with a layer of coal dust. To casual inspection, the bunker contains exactly what it should: fuel for heating. The Germans take possession on March 14th. Wehrmacht guards establish security perimeter. Engineers begin moving ammunition. Within 36 hours, the building contains 280 tons of artillery shells and 20 tons of small arms ammunition. Security is absolute. The building is locked. Guards patrol constantly. Nobody enters without authorization. The ammunition is safe, protected by Wehrmacht efficiency and German thoroughness. Marcel watches from across the street, standing in the ruins of his forced relocation. A ground-floor room in a half-destroyed building that used to house a tailor shop. He can see his bakery. He can see the guards. He can see the sealed windows and the reinforced doors. He's calculating. The flour is in position. 300 kilograms distributed through the building's infrastructure. Now he needs two things. He needs the flour to become airborne, suspended as explosive dust, rather than inert powder. And he needs an ignition source, something that will spark at exactly the right moment to detonate the cloud. Both requirements seem impossible. The building is sealed. Marcel has no access. Wehrmacht guards shoot saboteurs on sight. He can't enter to disperse the flour. He can't enter to place ignition charges. Every conventional sabotage technique requires physical access he doesn't have, unless he doesn't need physical access, unless the building itself can be weaponized, unless 22 years of managing bakery infrastructure taught him something Wehrmacht engineers never considered. Every building breathes. Temperature changes create air pressure differentials. Air moves through cracks, through ventilation paths, through spaces in the structure. The Germans sealed the windows, but they didn't seal the chimney. Marcel's bakery has 3 chimneys, brick passages running from basement to roof, originally serving fireplaces and ovens. The Germans left them open because sealed chimneys create moisture problems. Air pressure differentials draw air up through chimneys naturally. Warm air in the basement rises. Cool air at the roof level gets pulled down through other openings. The building maintains slight internal air circulation, even with windows sealed. That circulation can be weaponized. If Marcel can introduce an external air pressure change, a sudden temperature differential, or mechanical force, he can accelerate internal air movement. Accelerated air movement will disturb the hidden flour, pulling it from storage locations into the airstream. The dumbwaiter shaft will act as a vertical distribution channel. The crawl space will feed dust into the 3rd floor. The pneumatic tubes will carry particles through the walls. The coal bunker, where 200 kilograms weight in burlap sacks, will rupture as air pressure changes, releasing massive flour clouds into the basement. Within minutes, the entire building will be filled with explosive dust suspension. But this requires a trigger, something that creates sudden air pressure change from outside the building, something that breaches the sealed environment just enough to accelerate internal air circulation, something the Germans won't recognize as sabotage until it's too late. Marcel knows exactly what he needs: an artillery shell, specifically a German 150mm artillery shell, landing approximately 30 meters from his bakery. Not close enough to damage the building structurally, but close enough that the blast-over pressure creates sudden atmospheric compression. The shock wave will hit the building like a hammer. Pressure will spike momentarily, then drop as the shock wave passes. That pressure differential will pull air violently through every opening in the structure. The chimneys will act as vacuum channels. Air will rush up through the basement at high velocity. The burlap sacks in the coal bunker will tear apart. 200 kilograms of flour will disperse as a massive dust cloud. That cloud will rise through the dumbwaiter shaft, spreading to every floor. Within 15 seconds, the building will be filled with explosive concentration of flour particles. The German ammunition will be sitting inside a fuel-air bomb. All that's needed then is ignition. The portable generator in the basement provides that. Wehrmacht engineers positioned it poorly, right next to the coal bunker, running constantly to power the building's lights. The generator is a Bosch 3.5 kilowatt unit, gasoline-powered, with an exhaust manifold that runs at approximately 400 degrees Celsius during operation. The manifold is exposed, no heat shielding, standard design. When the flour dust cloud fills the basement, particles will settle on every surface, including the generator's hot manifold. Flour in contact with a 400-degree surface ignites in less than 2 seconds. That initial ignition will propagate through the suspended dust cloud at supersonic velocity. 300 kilograms of flour dispersed through 2,400 cubic meters of space will detonate with approximately 120 kilograms TNT equivalent. The explosion will occur inside a sealed building containing 300 tons of ammunition. Primary detonation triggers secondary detonation. Secondary detonation releases energy equivalent to approximately 150 tons of TNT. The bakery, the ammunition, and everything within 100 meters will cease to exist. The question is how Marcel gets a German artillery shell to land exactly 30 meters from his building. The answer is he doesn't need to. The Germans will do it themselves. March 15th, 1944. RAF Bomber Command at High Wycombe receives updated target lists for operations over northern France. Among the targets, the Chartres rail depot. Intelligence indicates substantial German military traffic through the junction. A raid is scheduled for March 18th. The operation calls for 60 Lancasters dropping 500-pound general-purpose bombs on the rail yards. Planned bombing altitude, 12,000 feet. Expected accuracy, plus or minus 200 meters from aim point. The Chartres rail depot is 80 meters from Marcel's bakery. Standard RAF bombing patterns will put high explosive ordnance all over that area. Marcel learns about the raid from Resistance Communications. BBC radio broadcast on March the 16th includes a coded message. The baker's dozen arrives Saturday. This is the prearranged signal. RAF raid on Chartres, confirmed for March 18th. Marcel has 48 hours to prepare. But preparation doesn't mean sabotage. It means observation. It means positioning himself where he can watch what happens when British bombs start falling and German ammunition depot 47B is subjected to massive atmospheric overpressure. It means having witnesses. The resistance needs documentation to confirm the depot's destruction. Marcel contacts his resistance liaison, a schoolteacher named Claude Moreau. The raid is confirmed. I need observers positioned at safe distance with clear sight lines to the bakery. When the bombs fall, I need photographs, if possible. Testimony, at minimum. Moreau looks at him skeptically. Marcel, when RAF bombs start falling, everyone will be in shelters. Nobody's going to stand in the street taking photographs. The bombs won't destroy the depot. The blast overpressure will trigger something else, something bigger. I need documentation that the depot exploded, not just that the British bombed the rail yards. What are you talking about? Marcel doesn't explain the flour dust mechanism. Moreau wouldn't understand the technical details, and frankly, Marcel himself isn't entirely certain the plan will work. Theory says it should. 22 years of preventing accidental explosions says the physics are sound. But theory and practice diverge in unpredictable ways. Just trust me. Position 3 observers at minimum safe distance. When the ammunition depot detonates, I need witnesses who can confirm it to Allied intelligence. Moreau agrees. The resistance has been desperate for actionable intelligence on German ammunition storage. If Marcel has somehow arranged for the depot's destruction, documentation is worth the risk. March 17, 1944. 2,340 hours. Marcel lies awake in his temporary quarters, listening to distant thunder that isn't thunder. Anti-aircraft batteries near Dreux are firing at something. The RAF raid is early, or German radar picked up the bomber stream sooner than expected. He gets dressed, pulls on a heavy coat, and walks outside. The streets of Chartres are empty. Curfew has been in effect since 2100 hours. German patrols shoot civilians found outside after dark. Marcel doesn't care. If the Gestapo arrests him in the next 2 hours, he'll miss the culmination of 6 days' planning. But the plan itself will proceed without him. He walks 3 blocks to a partially destroyed apartment building that offers elevated view of the bakery. Claude Moreau is already there with 2 other resistance members. One of them has a camera, a Leica seized from a German officer during a resistance ambush in January. "You're insane," Moreau hisses, as Marcel climbs through the rubble to their position. "The Germans will see you. The Germans are watching the sky." How long until the bombers arrive? 10 minutes, maybe less. The anti-aircraft batteries at Dreux are already engaged. Marcel positions himself at a collapsed window frame with clear sightline to the bakery. The building sits dark, except for faint light leaking around the sealed shutters. The Wehrmacht guards are alert, watching the sky, listening to the approaching drone of Merlin engines. The sound builds. 60 Lancasters approaching from the northwest at 12,000 feet. The anti-aircraft batteries around Chartres open fire. Tracer rounds arc into the night sky. Searchlights sweep the darkness, catching glimpses of bombers in their beams. Then the bombs fall. The first impacts hit the rail depot. Explosions blossom orange and red. Shrapnel tears through rolling stock and station buildings. A fuel tanker detonates, sending a pillar of fire 50 meters into the air. The bombing pattern walks across the target area. High explosive ordnance crashing down at 2-second intervals. Each bomb creates a pressure wave that ripples outward, shattering windows, collapsing walls, pulverizing anything not reinforced. A 500-pound bomb impacts 40 meters from the bakery. Too far. The building shudders but remains intact. Another bomb hits closer, 25 meters, still too far. Marcel watches Wehrmacht guards scatter, running for cover as the bombing intensifies. Nobody's guarding the ammunition depot anymore. They're trying not to die. Then a Lancaster drops its payload directly over the rail depot. 6 bombs falling in a stick pattern. 5 of them hit the rail yards. The 6th impacts 28 meters from Marcel's bakery, right on the edge of optimal range. The explosion is massive. A crater opens in the street. Cobblestones and debris spray outward. The pressure wave hits the bakery like a physical blow. Marcel sees what the Germans cannot see. He sees the building flex slightly as overpressure spikes. He sees dust puff from the chimney tops as air is suddenly compressed inside the structure. He sees the shutters bulge outward momentarily, then snap back. Inside the building, physics is doing exactly what Marcel predicted. The blast overpressure creates a compression wave that slams into the sealed structure. Air pressure inside spikes by 2 pounds per square inch in less than 1/10 of a second. Then the shock wave passes and pressure drops suddenly, creating a partial vacuum. Air rushes up through the chimneys to equalize pressure. Velocity in the narrow brick passages exceeds 30 meters per second. The airflow hits the dumbwaiter shaft, the crawl spaces, the pneumatic tube system. In the basement coal bunker, the burlap sacks containing 200 kilograms of flour are hit by the pressure wave. The fabric tears. Flour explodes outward as a dense cloud. The rushing air catches it, suspends it, carries it upward through the dumbwaiter shaft. 20 kilograms of flour packed in the shaft disperses instantly. Particles fill the vertical passage, then spill into each floor as the cloud expands. 30 kilograms in the third-floor crawl space is disturbed by the building's flexing. Dust sifts through ceiling cracks, falling into the ammunition storage areas below. 50 kilograms, distributed through the pneumatic tubes, is blown into the building's interior spaces as pressure equalizes through the old infrastructure. Within 15 seconds, the entire building contains flour dust suspension at approximately 140 grams per cubic meter, well above the 50 grams per cubic meter minimum explosive concentration, nearly optimal for maximum blast effect. The portable generator in the basement continues running. Its exhaust manifold glows at 420 degrees Celsius. Flour particles settle on the hot metal. Marcel sees none of this. Nobody can see inside the sealed building, but he knows the timeline. 15 seconds for dust dispersion, 2 seconds for ignition. He counts. 14, 15, 16. The bakery explodes. Not the sharp crack of high explosive. The deeper, more visceral detonation of fuel-air mixture. The explosion begins in the basement as flour particles on the generator manifold ignite. Combustion propagates through the suspended dust cloud at 600 meters per second. Temperature inside the building spikes to 2,100 degrees Celsius in less than 1 second. Every cubic meter of air superheats and expands violently. The sealed windows blow outward. Stone frames disintegrate. The shutters, reinforced with steel bars, are thrown 40 meters down the street like shrapnel. The roof lifts. 3-ton wooden beams snap like kindling. Slate tiles become projectiles. The entire roof structure rises 6 meters, then collapses back into the building. The walls bulge outward. 300-year-old stone masonry, held together by lime mortar, simply comes apart. The north wall collapses into the street. The south wall topples into the adjacent building. The east and west walls crack from foundation to roofline, but remain partially standing for another 3 seconds before structural failure completes. Then the ammunition detonates. 300 tons of artillery shells, mortar rounds, and small arms ammunition, subjected to 2,100-degree heat and massive structural collapse, detonate in a cascading chain reaction. The first shells cook off individually, then clusters, then entire ammunition pallets detonate simultaneously. The secondary explosion dwarfs the primary. Energy equivalent to 150 tons of TNT releases in less than 2 seconds. The remaining building structure vaporizes. Stone blocks weighing 200 kilograms are thrown 150 meters. The crater extends 8 meters below street level, exposing medieval foundations and Roman-era construction beneath. The blast wave radiates outward at supersonic velocity. Windows shatter for 400 meters in all directions. The adjacent buildings, already damaged by the collapsing bakery walls, are hammered by overpressure and collapse completely. The Wehrmacht garrison, 150 meters away, loses its western wall. Roof structures across 2 city blocks are stripped away as if scraped by a giant hand. The sound is heard 30 kilometers away. Citizens in Rambouillet report a massive explosion to the south. German forces in Dreux report the same. Seismographs in Paris register the detonation as a magnitude 2.1 seismic event. Marcel watches from his observation position 200 meters away. The blast wave hits his building 3 seconds after detonation. The pressure surge blows out the remaining windows. Moreau and the other resistance members are thrown backward. The photographer's Leica is torn from his hands and smashed against the wall. But they're alive. 200 meters was sufficient distance. Barely. The explosion column rises 300 meters into the night sky, illuminated by fires burning across the impact zone. Debris continues falling for 45 seconds. Chunks of stone, twisted metal, pieces of ammunition crates rain down across 6 city blocks. When the immediate destruction settles, Marcel stands and looks at where his bakery used to be. Nothing remains. The building is simply gone. In its place, a crater filled with rubble and fire. The adjacent structures are collapsed ruins. The street is buried under tons of debris. 300 tons of German ammunition, erased. The largest ammunition depot within 50 kilometers destroyed. Wehrmacht artillery batteries across the region will be out of supply within days. German defensive operations along the Atlantic Wall will be disrupted for weeks. And the Germans will blame the RAF. The British bombed Chartres. A bomb must have hit the ammunition depot. Catastrophic bad luck. But the fault lies with whoever decided to store 300 tons of ordnance in a civilian building in the center of town. Wehrmacht quartermasters will be reprimanded. Security procedures will be reviewed. Nobody will investigate the actual mechanism of destruction because the explanation is obvious. British bomb equals destroyed depot. The investigation begins at dawn. March 18th, 0620 hours. Wehrmacht engineers survey the destruction. Hauptmann Kohler, the quartermaster who requisitioned Marcel's bakery, stands at the crater's edge, staring at the devastation. "What bomb did this?" he asks his engineering officer. "Unknown, Herr Hauptmann. British 500-pound bombs don't typically create this level of destruction, but the ammunition depot's secondary detonation magnified the effect." The building was supposed to be secure. How did a single bomb cause complete structural failure? The engineer hesitates. The blast pattern suggests the primary detonation occurred inside the building, not from external impact. But that's impossible, unless what? Unless the building contained volatile materials we weren't aware of. Was this structure used for anything before we requisitioned it? It was a bakery. The engineer nods slowly. Bakeries contain flour. Flour dust in suspension is explosive. If somehow a large quantity of flour was still present in the building when the British bombs fell, and if the blast overpressure dispersed it as dust, and if an ignition source was present. You're suggesting the baker sabotaged his own building? I'm suggesting a possible mechanism, Herr Hauptmann, though it seems implausibly complex. More likely, the British bomb hit the building directly, and we simply haven't found the impact crater due to the severity of secondary detonation. Kohler accepts this explanation because the alternative is too disturbing. The idea that a French baker could destroy 300 tons of ammunition using flour seems absurd. Sabotage requires explosives, weapons, direct action, not dust and pressure waves. The official Wehrmacht report filed on March 20th concludes that Ammunition Depot 47B was destroyed by direct impact from British 500-pound bomb during RAF raid on Chartres rail depot. The report notes that storing ammunition in civilian buildings presents unacceptable vulnerability to air attack. It recommends dispersing future ammunition storage to hardened facilities outside urban areas. The report never mentions flour. Marcel Dubois is questioned briefly on March 19th. A Wehrmacht sergeant asks if he stored any hazardous materials in his bakery before requisition. "Only flour, Herr Sergeant. Standard baking supplies." "How much flour?" "I removed 500 kilograms before you took possession. That's documented in the requisition paperwork." "Was any flour left behind?" "Perhaps small quantities in the machinery or storage bins." Impossible to remove every trace. The sergeant notes this and moves on. Small quantities of residual flour don't explain the magnitude of destruction. The British bomb is sufficient explanation. Marcel is released. He returns to his temporary quarters and sleeps for 14 hours straight. The strategic impact of Ammunition Depot 47B's destruction becomes apparent within a week. German artillery units across the region report ammunition shortages. The 353rd Infantry Division near Dreux reduces artillery support missions by 60% due to shell shortages. The 17th SS Panzer Grenadiers Division delays scheduled training exercises because mortar ammunition isn't available. Wehrmacht logistics officers scramble to reroute supplies from depots near Paris and Rouen. This creates bottlenecks. Transport capacity is already strained supporting military operations across France. Diverting trains to cover the Chartres shortage means delaying shipments to other units. By early April, German defensive preparations along the Atlantic Wall are measurably degraded in the sectors that relied on Chartres distributed ammunition. Concrete fortifications are being built, but the artillery that's supposed to defend them is undersupplied. Allied intelligence notices. British code breakers at Bletchley Park intercept Wehrmacht logistics communications, referencing the Chartres incident and subsequent supply disruptions. The intelligence is passed to SHAEF, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, planning the Normandy invasion. Planners note that German defensive capabilities in sectors supplied through Chartres are temporarily weakened. The information contributes to targeting decisions for D-Day preparatory bombardments. On June 6, 1944, when Allied forces storm the beaches of Normandy, German artillery response in certain sectors is lighter than expected. Wehrmacht units are rationing ammunition, firing fewer counter-battery missions, conserving shells for critical moments that never quite arrive because the sustained fire necessary to stop an amphibious assault requires ammunition stockpiles that aren't there. Some of those missing stockpiles were sitting in Marcel Dubois' bakery on March 17th. The direct casualties from the explosion total 47 German soldiers killed, 89 wounded. The Wehrmacht garrison suffered when the blast wave collapsed their building's western wall. Security patrols near the depot were killed by flying debris. Personnel in the rail depot were hit by secondary fragmentation. French civilian casualties were minimal. 4 dead, 11 wounded. Marcel's insistence on timing the sabotage to coincide with an RAF raid meant most civilians were in shelters when the detonation occurred. The indirect casualties, the German soldiers who died on D-Day because their artillery units were undersupplied, because ammunition shortages degraded defensive fire, because Marcel turned his bakery into a bomb, are impossible to calculate. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Marcel never knows the full strategic impact. He knows the depot was destroyed. He knows German operations were disrupted. He reads resistance reports about ammunition shortages. Hears BBC broadcasts about successful Allied advances. But the causal chain connecting his bakery to those outcomes remains invisible to him. What Marcel does know is how to prevent flour dust explosions and how to cause them. The technique spreads. By April 1944, Marcel's story reaches other resistance networks through circuitous channels. The details are confused, embellished, partially understood. But the core concept transmits clearly enough. Flour dust in suspension equals explosive mixture. Sealed buildings plus pressure waves equals dust dispersion. German installations plus fuel-air detonation equals strategic sabotage. On April 29, 1944, a German supply depot in Amiens explodes during a RAF raid. The depot was storing medical supplies and uniforms in a converted grain mill. Wehrmacht investigation concludes a British bomb penetrated the roof. Post-explosion analysis finds Marcel Dubois never baked another loaf of bread. But in the summer of 1944, watching American tanks roll through liberated Chartres past the crater where his grandfather's bakery once stood, he understood that sometimes the most devastating recipes require no measurements at all. Just a lifetime of knowledge about what happens when you ignore the safety margins that keep ordinary things from becoming extraordinary weapons.